Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back to NPTEL online certification course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. In this particular lecture, we will be discussing one very important topic and something which is very much essential for conducting any research, and it is all about the ethics. So, ethics in data management and data uses and different type of ethical approval that nowadays you should take if your research requires that kind of data collection. If you are going to do something on some clinical trials research, or if you are going to do something based on some human behavior, okay, or maybe you are going to do some sort of cognitive mapping, and you are using certain gadget to test the subjects, or in that case the people on whom you are going to test those experiment. In all such cases we require certain approval, because that is coming under the ethics, and without which it is definitely lead to a very complex situation. In many cases that will not be accepted in scientific community, and in some cases those research are considered to be illegal. So, it is important for us, definitely, like it will depend on type of research that you are doing. If it requires that kind of ethical approval to be taken, you should take it, and you should go through that process, guidelines, whatever rules, regulations, different kind of standard that are available to assure that whatever you are doing, that is ethical, right. So, with that particular concept, let us focus on today's lecture, lecture number 29, titled Ethics in Data Management and Use. Now, what will we learn from this lecture? As I already mentioned, we will talk about the ethics in data management and its importance in research, and also we will discuss about the ethical data management principles. So, there are certain principles, definitely the principles that I will discuss here, you may get something more, but these are most common principles, and maybe the other principles if you find in some other document or on internet. So, probably those are related to these broad principles only, right. And after that, what I thought that also tell you about some common types of ethical approvals. Sometimes whenever you are submitting a journal paper to some good journals, so in those cases you will also get this kind of notification, like you have to approve those, that whether like you have taken this approval, whether your research involves some human or animal experiment. So, you have to give your consent, and in some cases like you have also need to provide the valid document that you have that approval. Otherwise, definitely that will not be acceptable, and then we will summarize our understanding out of it. So, ethics in data management, what exactly it is? The data ethics encompasses the moral obligations and considerations when collecting the information, handling that particular collected information or the data, and using the data for your research purpose. So, at the moment of data collection, if if your research requires such kind of ethical approvals, you have to take the consent from the participants, or you have to take the consent, written consent from the subjects if you are going to test something on that particular person. So, many a times this is some other example that I can share here, that for any new medicine or maybe any new vaccine, the best example you can consider our like COVID vaccine. So, at the very initial phase, definitely that went through different type of trials, first on animals and then probably on human, and then the people who volunteered it. So, there were some kind of consents taken from those kind of subjects, because that is very important. Even when you are going for some sort of participation kind of survey, or maybe you go for a perception survey. So, in some cases you also need to take the consent that okay, so this is some kind of declaration that I am giving, that your perception will be taken as anonymous, and then it will be used only for the research purpose, and that will not really be published in such a way that that will defame you or that will talk about you. And that is why some case, like in most of the cases for those kind of perception based studies, we do not ask any personal information. So, to represent that sample as a representative of the population, we just take other characteristics. But in some cases, like when you go for an expert survey that we have discussed, in those point, sometimes you require their information like their name, their email IDs, but obviously you cannot simply share it, okay, even if you have those information. So, you should know that okay, what type of information you can share, and in such cases what kind of permission that you require. It may be from the organization, it may be from individual. So, in collecting information, handling that information or the data, and how you use that data for what purpose, that has to be very clear. And then if required, that has to be something conveyed to the participants or the subjects. Again, in this case, the other point is the moral principle and guidelines that govern how data is collected, stored and analyzed. So, this is again you can say that make it very transparent, that okay, I am not really doing something that I collect some information and then I just manipulate it and I just portray that okay, people say that. So, there should be a transparency, and in some cases you also need to share the analyzed result to your participant, okay, before like taking it or publish it, and then that comes under the data management ethics. This includes a wide range of issues like privacy, consent, transparency, fairness and accountability. So, we will discuss each of them in subsequent slides, but privacy is something where you just take some information which is encrypted. So, you are not authorized to simply publish it, okay. In some cases which is very confidential, maybe in some kind of case it is like a biomedical research or something genetic research. So, in those cases it is very sensitive and you cannot simply publish that for the open audience. Consent already I have mentioned, where you are going to do some sort of experiment, like maybe it is something like the human on human, you are going to do some experiment, you are going to measure some sort of cognitive ability of that person, or maybe something like heart rate variability for certain issues. So, in those cases you have to first take the consent to take part into your survey, and you also have to give freedom to that respondent after looking at the terms and conditions and what you are going to do with that data. If somebody will think of opt out, so probably you have to give that particular freedom to the participants. Transparency is all about that what is the intention of collecting that information, what you are going to do, and then definitely the questions that can come to a participant, so you have to answer accordingly. Fairness, definitely you should not be biased in selecting the sample. It should not be something only you take some good data point and then you remove all the bad points to portray some kind of biased result. So, that fairness should also be there. For participation based survey, you should take care of all segment of the society, it should not be a particular group. But definitely if your research is on particular group, that is a different case. But if it is something that you are going to do with say entire population, so the representativeness of that population or the participation from each segment of the society is very important. So, you have to take care of that kind of fairness. So, some kind of injustice to a group should not be the case. And after that you should be looking into the accountability of that data you collected. So, there should be a proper database management, proper storage of that, and then whenever that particular information is of no use, so there is also some sort of policy that you need to develop, like in many company they can retain the data or they can give they can delete the data. Now, in many cases you have seen this particular aspect, like say for installing any new app to your mobile phones. Whenever you install, it will ask some sort of permission like location or contract or maybe storage. Along with that, there are so many write up which is much more in a legal term about the terms and condition, and you have to click OK or accept to use it. Even for any software, when we install, many a times we just simply click next, next, next and install it, but there are so many terms and policy. So, by clicking yes, we are giving our consent, right. Even you can recall earlier, nowadays probably things are much more on a biometric. If you are going to get a new SIM, so then in that case what they are doing, they are taking your biometric, as because it is linked with Aadhaar, so Aadhaar card in India. So, those kind of basic information will be fetched, and then they will just simply click your photograph, and probably they will say that that should be a live photograph, so that you should blink your eyes and all, and that is done. In return, basically at the back end, it is nothing but filling those kind of terms and condition and filling those information and accepting it. So, earlier if you see that when SIM was distributed like in a manual way, so then there were certain kind of consent form, and then so much write up was there, and we used to give a hard copy, signed hard copy of any identity proof like voter card. That time probably Aadhaar card was not available in India, and with that particular case, that those kind of verification was done, address proof and the name and all, and then your SIM will get activated. Now, things are much more faster, it can get approved in next few hours. So, the main point or the reason for giving this example is to tell you that again in all such cases, like they are taking certain sort of consent from us, whether we have read it, whether we have gone through it, that is a different point, but by giving our signature, by clicking yes to those kind of prompted action, we are giving the consent, right. So, for that particular case, that whenever you are doing research, so you should also think of having those kind of accountability, that what you are going to do with that information. You cannot simply collect the information and can dilute or just defame those participants in some cases. Like in many cases probably those kind of consent are not required. If you are going for some sort of observation survey, you require certain approval, okay, from different authority, but in different countries they have different set of rules. Like probably in some context you do not need to really take the approval to take a photograph or use one image, but in some country probably even taking a photograph on a busy street requires some certain sort of approval, right. So, it is crucial for maintaining public trust and upholding the rights of the data subjects. So, here subjects means for experiment whom we are selecting. So, they are referred as subjects, or you can say participants. Now, for ethical data management principle, in broad few principles we will be discussing here about the data privacy, transparency of the information and the whole process, data security, data accuracy, then fairness and equity, informed consent, data ownership, compliance with regulation, data governance, social responsibility, and last but not the least, the data retention and deletion. So, we will discuss very briefly each of them and its relevance in our research. So, for data privacy, the main principle is that we have to respect individuals' privacy rights. So, definitely the information that we are collecting, so there might be some kind of information which is very private and probably that people may not share with you. And most of the cases, if we take example of planning and architectural research, in such case also when you take the participation survey like perception survey or some kind of participation based analysis that we are planning to do, or that kind of survey that we are conducting, we may not require certain personal or private information. It is all about like gender, income level, etc., etc. So, we have to take care of that. Even if in some case we collect information, but that they are very sensitive. So, you have to take the consent and at the same time you have to encrypt that part. So, only like it is something that it will not be shared to anybody else, right. So, in this case definitely you have to obtain the informed consent, collect only necessary data and implement robust privacy measure. So, that is why I am saying that unnecessarily you should not ask those kind of questions which may not be required in your research. So, only ask the necessary questions. Knowing a name of a sample respondent will not make any difference, because if we are going to do a survey on certain perception towards certain development, certain infrastructure need, etc. So, it is better to go anonymous. But say for example, you are going to do some survey in a different nature, that you just try to analyze that okay, in a particular city in current generation, if you want to understand the names, okay, that what kind of names are being repeated or parents they prefer to name their child. So, then probably you require those kind of information, that what is the name of the child. So, that is a different purpose where it is intended to do the work on the name of the participant, but in general definitely we do not require the name. So, this is one kind of rule you can follow. You can take other information, but say again address, okay, or maybe you should not ask about the Aadhaar, PAN card, all such kind of information for those kind of result. But definitely when it is a survey that to be conducted by certain bank or something, so maybe their purpose is different. So, they are maybe for the KYC and all, they require certain information. So, only take necessary information and also maintain the privacy, that this data will not be leaked and will be just shared to anybody who are not also intended to get that particular information. Coming to the next one, which is on transparency, be transparent about the data practices. So, you should tell your subjects or your participants that what exactly the whole research about and for which you are collecting this information. Even if you do not share the entire research, but for that particular objective for which you are collecting information, you should clearly state that. That will also give confidence to the respondent. Otherwise, one may think that why all of a sudden somebody is asking few questions. So, there should be some sort of, you can say, introduction or a initial write-up for any such questionnaire to introduce the survey, the purpose of it, and then what type of informations are required, and then what will be the use of that. And mostly we have to also give the disclaimer that it will be like kept confidential and only used for academic purpose or the research purpose. So, you have to clearly state that. Clearly communicate how data is collected and processed and used. So, you should not manipulate that information. Many a times we see that okay, some interview somebody has given to a particular newspaper or some media, and then probably there is some kind of manipulation. But for a research purpose it should be accurate, okay, reflection of what you have collected. It should not be manipulated and then some induced observation to be you can say that to be told to the readers, right. It should not be something you blend your own interpretation which is not coming out of your data. Coming to the data security, you have to also think of safeguard the data against unauthorized access. So, whenever you are having a good amount of data that you collect, so also you need to safeguard it, because if they are very sensitive information and if somebody like at this particular age where there are so much rise in the cyber crime and all, so definitely you should have a very strong protocol, okay. And for that is why here it is mentioned that you should implement the strong security measures, regularly update the protocols and conduct security audits. So, you keep on increasing the security thing, and even you can see that many a times like for your any application, any Android application, or maybe even in computer softwares, or maybe in that particular case the the operating system. So, they keep on asking to upgrade some kind of security patch, right. So, system update that it will take. So, when they are improving from one to another, or maybe there is another improvement in the security patch. So, we normally update it so that it will protect our information and the software will run in a protective manner. Similarly, for your research, depending on the purpose and type of information that you have, you also should have certain policy to safeguard that information, and it should not go to somebody like definitely some unauthorized access to this. At the same time, you also maintain the data accuracy. So, ensure the quality control measure and allow individuals to correct inaccuracies in their data and update the information regularly. So, this is very important, like even if something somewhere it is some mistakes or that is not actually the correct data. So, in that case you can ask your participant to correct it, or else if you see that okay, during the experiment there was something wrong, some algorithm or some setup was wrong and the information collected is not correct. If you could able to find that, it's better that not to go ahead with that data, you conduct the experiment once again. So, that something is very required whenever we are doing the research, because any wrong information will lead to a wrong interpretation of the analyzed data, and then that may lead to a wrong decision making, because in many cases when it is a applied research, so whatever you are saying probably will lead to a product design or maybe a new medicine will come in the market. So, you have to be 100% sure about that, right. Moving ahead, about the fairness and equity, ensure fairness in algorithms and data driven decision. So, it is again like we do not induce our own opinion. So, it should be data driven decision. So, whatever the data talk about, so you should portray the same thing. In this case, you should assess and address the biases to avoid unfair treatment of individual or group. So, that means you should not only take the information where somebody is talking about good for certain feedback. So, you are trying to gather certain satisfaction, and you should not only intend to get the people who are giving you 5 stars. At the same time, you should also take the information like where they are not giving you 5 star and what could be the possible reason. So, that is why it is very much required to make a fair judgment, then only you can say the overall opinion, right. Then coming to the informed consent, in this case obtain the clear and informed consent for the data collection from the participants who are participating in your experiment or in your questionnaire survey if required. In this case you have to clearly explain the purpose of data collection and the use of it, and also provide individuals with a choice to opt in or opt out. So, after knowing about what you are going to do with that information and other aspect of your research, if somebody will say that okay, I am not going to take part, I am not interested, you should not force that particular person, or you do not need to manipulate that particular thing. Okay. So, in such case definitely you have to give individuals that particular option to opt in or opt out, because that is their ethical rights, that they can take part or they cannot, depending on the purpose of the research and all these kind of terms and conditions that you put into your consent form. Coming to the data ownership principle. So, in this case you have to define the ownership, that who will own that particular information. In many cases such kind of information generated from my experiment, so maybe the user is also the owner of that, or maybe sometimes it is something you are taking the ownership, that okay, by participating whatever information that we will collect, that I will take the copyright of this. So, that should be clear before you really conduct the experiment and involve subjects in your experiment. In this case clearly communicate the ownership and usage terms to the participants, and especially for the user generated content where users they are doing it. So, many a times you submit a design or a logo competition, you submit certain thing. So, there are certain kind of clarity that okay, about the copyright, the ownership, will own it after suppose it is getting selected. So, all such terms and conditions should be laid very clearly, so that there should not be any complex situation later on. Another important aspect is you have to have the compliance with the regulations, and in this case stay compliant with the relevant laws and regulations and have a look at it, because it's keep on updating depending on other aspect. So, regularly update the practice to align with the data protection laws, industry standards, and also the applicable regulations. So, this is something the regulation, legal system, standard, law, rules, and also the requirements. So, based on that you have to update your information. So, broadly, like some agency which are collecting information in a daily basis, so for them probably this is very important. Even for individual research, if something that you are going to do on certain animal research or human research, so you should follow certain kind of norms. Suppose if you are going to do some kind of medical experiment, okay, in such case you have to follow the rules and standard for you can say that SOP, the standard operating procedure. So, for that you have to go through all those points, that how to do it and up to what level you can intervene, or what kind of instrument that are okay to use and which are not to be in the prevailing situation, or maybe in the context or the region that you are doing. So, you have to follow that. It may not be same across the world. So, probably whatever is very much applicable in India may not be exactly same in something somewhere in Europe or US, right. So, you have to follow those already made regulations or available guidelines for such kind of experiment. Next we have the data governance, where you have to establish the effective data governance and develop clear policy and procedure for data management. So, how you portray the data, you are creating some sort of dashboard to give the highlights or maybe the key findings in a short form. It is not the raw data probably. So, you have to have clear definition of it. Then coming to the social responsibility, in this case definitely societal impact we need to consider. Definitely if something to showcase some findings from that point. So, act responsibly to contribute positively to the societal well-being. It should not be something to really defame some part of the society, or something that you are going to do through your research is actually making some sort of indirect defame or insult to a certain group. So basically, when you are going for a cross cultural research, or maybe work on the indigenous people, so definitely you should be considerable and act very carefully to take care of the social responsibility. Coming to the last part of it, of this principle, so data retention and deletion. So manage the data retention responsibly, that if you would like to store the data, and there should be some sort of a policy. Establish clear policies for data retention and deletion, and delete data when it is no longer needed for the particular stated purpose. Because in many cases, like if you keep on getting the information, so it required the storage, and at the same time suppose that data the purpose was fulfilled and you do not require further reference. So in such cases, like you can take a call on deletion of those information, right. And in some cases, like if that is something, also the ownership is shared between the users and the researcher, or the authority who have collected the information. So it should not be the case that you take a single call that and you delete the information which may not be now get accessed by the users. So you need to be careful about this. Now coming to the common types of ethical approvals. So in this case, definitely human research ethics approval. If you are going to do some experimental research on human, so you have to take that approval. There are certain standard committee, maybe in your institute there is a committee, or maybe in that particular zone you have a such committee. So there is a standard review, and then you have to explain your experiment, what you are going to do, and whether it is okay to go ahead or not, you will get the approval. Informed consent documentation, that wherever you are taking the participants, there should be some kind of consent form, get it signed by them, and then you just can produce those information as and when required. Animal ethics, also there are committees where definitely if you want to do some experiment, you have to take those approval. Environmental and ecological ethics approval. Suppose your experiment or your research is going to impact something on the ecology and environment, or maybe there is some involvement that you are going to test in that particular environmental research. So you have to take the approval accordingly. Clinical trials registration, in this case also definitely you need certain kind of proper consent given by the participants, or like the subjects, about the clinical trials. This is something many journals, even all the journals, so they are asking for the conflict of interest disclosure. Suppose when you are submitting a paper, so there should not be any conflict with certain funding agency, or there should not be any such kind of conflict among the authors as well. So no conflict declaration, or else if there is some kind of conflict, or it is something like it is just to promote a particular organization, or to just you can say that defame some institution. So those kind of things it is not correct. So in those cases you have to give the conflict of interest disclosure statement. So either you have no conflict, or if you have conflicts, so you have to state those points as well. Now in this case, definitely the data sharing and access statement is also be very clearly mentioned, if you want to share the data and what form you are going to share it. Then other one is definitely, which is also coming under some sort of ethical as practice, about to check about the similarity percentage of your research. And in this case, like in many cases, many journals, they do have their own software, but if not, you can check it, and you can also submit that information whenever it is asked. Authorship and contributionship statement. So, this is nowadays very common that whenever you submit a paper, so you must assure that who are like contributing to your that particular research or that journal paper or the manuscript that you made, you have to mention all of them, and it is obvious that you have discussed with all of the co-authors and they have given their consent to go ahead with that particular submission, and then also the contribution. So, what at what capacity each authors they are contributing. Like in many journals they ask about the the concept development, methodology, data collection, supervision, validation, initial writing, editing. So, all such information that you have to mention, that if there are multiple co-authors, that how they are contributing. So, that may be equal contribution or it may be that each of them are taking care of each component, that you need to mention. Then acknowledgement of funding, that is also something you have to acknowledge not only the funding, along with all the organizations or individuals who helped you to conduct the research effectively, you have to mention that. Then compliance with the ethical guidelines, wherever it is applicable, so you should go for it and follow that. Consent for image and identifying information. So, in this case definitely you cannot randomly use certain images which are very sensitive, or maybe it is containing some confidential information. Suppose something, it is like some kind of scan image, or maybe in biomedical research there might be some sort of other image based research. So, you cannot simply use it without a proper consent. Approval for use of special population. Suppose if you want to do your survey specially for a age group, or maybe at some sort of the age group below 5 or so. So, that time also you have to take the approval. For biomedical imaging ethics approval, already I have mentioned. So, it is very sensitive and there should be a very some kind of strong protocols, and definitely there are certain kind of rules and regulations set by different association, medical association. So, you have to follow that. This is nowadays is very important, that emerging technologies and ethical approval. So, nowadays you notice that if you are going to submit a paper, it will ask that is there any content in your write up is generated through artificial intelligence, any generative AI. So, I do not name any such platform, but there are so many options, open source platforms and subscription based platforms are available, where you can take help of generative AI text. So, they are asking about this. So, this is something also you have to give a particular consent, and then you have to approve it. Then this is also important, approval for international collaboration. So, in research collaboration is definitely having a very high acceptance, and maybe in that case whenever we collaborate, things can even make much more visible to the world, but at the same time you also need to take approval for such kind of collaboration. If there are certain kind of conflicts between two organizations, or maybe there are certain kind of government level issues. So, probably if there are certain kind of mandate, you should follow that protocol, right. So, with that we in this particular lecture, to summarize here, definitely we understood the importance of ethics and data management part for any information that you collect, whether from survey or from experiment. You have to take proper care of those information, starting from collecting, taking consent, managing that data, and what kind of information that you can publish. We discussed about ethical data management principles, broadly about the data privacy, accuracy, fairness, etc., to ensure that you are following the data ethics. And then last but not the least, we have discussed about some sort of ethical approvals that you require for submitting your research or presenting your research to the scientific community. So, hope these are useful information to you, and you can well take care of this kind of aspect while you are conducting your research. And if your research requires such kind of approval, please make sure that you follow that proper channel to get this kind of approvals for your research purpose, and also keep those things documented. So, that will make you like confident about the research process, and then that can help you to produce effective research without any hindrance and some kind of unethical means. So, with that this is the end of this particular lecture. So, next we will discuss another important aspect, and probably many of us will have these questions about the issue of similarity versus plagiarism. So, that we will be discussing in our next lecture. So, we will be meeting very soon with this lecture. Till then, thank you for joining. Bye bye.